I would like to be a superstar. I guess all people dream of that. So in order to be a superstar, you can't be just a superstar in one area. That means you have to appeal to the majority of people. And that's what I'm trying to do.
What if the brightest star you know once almost chose to extinguish herself? We all know Dolly Parton, an icon of never-ending joy and positivity. Her smile seems to light up the world, and her music is a healing balm for millions of souls. She truly appears to be sunshine that cannot be extinguished. But a terrifying truth has just been confirmed by her own words after years of silence. There was a moment, in a closed room, when that sunshine completely faded. At the peak of her career, with the entire world cheering her name, Dolly Parton sat alone with a loaded gun, ready to make a final decision. What truly happened in that room? And how did the woman who embodies light manage to pull herself back from absolute darkness? The pain of a childhood without a place. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a small one-room wooden cabin in a remote area of Tennessee known as Locust Ridge. She was the fourth of 12 children, and her family was so poor that, as she would later describe, they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, was a hard-working tobacco farmer who never learned to read or write, a fact that would deeply influence Dolly later in her life. Her mother, Avie Lee Owens, dedicated her entire existence to raising her 12 children. On the many nights when there was not enough food for everyone, she would sing to them, and the beautiful folk songs she sang became a form of nourishment for their spirits. Life inside the small cabin was a constant struggle for survival, as 12 children slept crowded together on the floor. There was no electricity and no running water to drink or wash with. During the harsh mountain winters, the poverty was so extreme that ice would form on the inside of the cabin walls, and each morning, the children had to break a thin layer of ice on the water basin just to wash their faces. However, Dolly's pain was not only physical, because the emotional pain of being an outcast was just as severe. At school, she was an easy target for other children, who cruelly called her trash because of her family's poverty. They made fun of her worn-out shoes, which often had holes in them, and they laughed at her clothes, which were patched together by her mother from old rags. One day, the shame became too much for her to bear, and she stood alone behind the schoolhouse, covering her face with her hands as she cried. In that moment, she was overwhelmed by a powerful feeling that she did not belong anywhere in the world. This feeling of being rejected would become a silent, powerful force that motivated her to escape her circumstances. Music was her only way out. When she was 7 years old, she created her own guitar from an old cornstalk and 2 used guitar strings, and she began writing her first songs on scraps of paper. Her lyrics told stories about her difficult life, her secret sorrows, and her small, hopeful dreams. At the age of 10, she began singing on a local radio station in the nearby city of Knoxville, where her clear, high-pitched voice started to get attention. But that attention also brought with it more prejudice and judgment. When she was just 13 years old, Dolly Parton was given the chance to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, the most famous and respected stage in all of country music. She stood nervously behind the curtain, trembling in a dress she had made herself. The legendary singer Johnny Cash introduced her to the audience, but as she walked into the bright lights, she heard loud laughter coming from the crowd. People began to whisper to each other. "Country bumpkin," one person said. "Look at her cheap clothes, trying to be on the Grand Ole Opry stage," said another. An older, established artist standing near the stage even said loud enough for Dolly to hear, "She will never become famous looking like that." Dolly's face turned bright red, and tears filled her eyes as she felt thousands of invisible needles piercing her heart. But in that moment of public humiliation, she took a deep breath, looked directly into the powerful stage lights, and began to sing. She sang her entire song without stopping. Later that night, as she traveled back to the cold cabin in Locust Ridge, a firm and unbreakable decision formed in her mind. She told herself, "If I stay here, I will drown in poverty and disrespect." That promise to herself became a vow for her survival. On the very day she graduated from high school in 1964, Dolly Parton packed her few belongings and left the mountains, determined never to look back. The first fight for survival in Nashville. Her journey to Nashville began with only $20 and that same cardboard suitcase, leading to a life in a dirty, cheap apartment where rats ran freely across the floor. To stay alive, she ate whatever she could find, and her meals often consisted of nothing more than a free packet of crackers and a bottle of ketchup. Every day, she walked up and down the streets of Music Row, knocking on the doors of every record label and publishing office she could find. The answer she received was always the same: a firm and dismissive no. The music producers in the city criticized everything about her, telling her that her voice was too high and sounded like a cartoon character. They said her style was too country and old-fashioned, and they insisted that the music industry did not need or want a singer like her. Dozens of doors were slammed in her face, and with each rejection, the weight of failure and self-doubt began to crush her spirit. One night, she sat all alone in her dark, empty room, feeling the sharp pains of hunger and overwhelming loneliness. She held her guitar in her arms and began to cry, with tears streaming down her face. In that moment of complete despair, she asked herself, "Am I fooling myself? Maybe they are all right. Maybe I am just a stupid country girl with a foolish dream." It was the closest she ever came to giving up, as she seriously considered returning to the mountains to accept the life of poverty she had fought so hard to escape. But then, images from her past flashed through her mind: the freezing cabin, the cruel taunts of the other children at school, and the pitying looks from people in her town. The vow she had made to herself years ago echoed in her memory, and she knew she could not go back. She had to keep fighting. From that night on, Dolly resolved to do any job necessary to survive. She earned a few dollars by singing demo recordings for other songwriters, and she worked as a waitress in a small diner. During the day, she continued to visit record labels, and at night, she sat in her small room and wrote songs without stopping. She wrote about her pain, her hopes, and her daily struggle to survive in the city. This intense and desperate effort finally led to a small glimmer of hope. In 1967, a small label called Monument Records offered her a contract, not because they believed in her as a solo artist, but because they recognized her talent as a songwriter. However, one producer decided to give her a chance with a song titled "Dumb Blonde." The song was a bold statement that declared, "Just because I'm blonde, don't think I'm dumb." Ironically, the song became a minor hit, reaching the country music charts. It was her first real success, but it came at a high price, because the record label wanted to control her image and her music. Dolly quickly realized that she had only escaped the prison of poverty to enter a new prison created by the music industry. She was still not truly free, and her fight for survival was only just beginning. A savior or a jailer? Later in 1967, a much bigger opportunity appeared when Porter Wagoner, one of the biggest stars in country music at the time, invited Dolly to become the new female singer on his popular television program. The Porter Wagoner Show. This was a life-changing chance for her, and she was filled with joy and immense pride. She saw it as the ultimate proof that all her years of hard work and talent were finally being recognized. She excitedly called her family and friends back home to share the news, telling them, "Someone finally sees my value. This is the opportunity that will change my entire life." She dreamed of a bright future where she could sing her own songs for millions of people, and she truly believed that all her struggles were finally over. The first few years of their partnership were a tremendous success, as the duo of Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton became a national sensation. Their duets consistently reached the top of the charts, and Dolly's fame exploded across the country. She had finally achieved the recognition she had always craved. But behind the bright stage lights, a dark and controlling reality began to emerge. Porter Wagoner was not just a partner, he was a controller. The contract Dolly had signed gave him complete power over her career, allowing him to take a large percentage of her income. He chose which songs she was allowed to sing, decided what clothes she had to wear, and controlled the public image she had to present. All of Dolly's own creative ideas were immediately dismissed. When she wanted to experiment with new musical styles, Porter refused. And when she wrote deeply personal songs, he told her they were not suitable for the show. Dolly felt like she was being treated as a piece of property, an asset to be managed rather than an artist to be respected. She was simply the girl singer on Porter's show. The conflicts between them grew more frequent and intense, leading to loud arguments in the recording studio, backstage, and in his office. She felt that she was slowly losing her own identity, and the dream she had worked so hard for was turning into a golden prison. She knew she had to leave, but the contract held her captive. In 1973, after many sleepless nights, Dolly made the painful decision to leave the show and reclaim her career. But she did not know how to tell Porter. She knew he would never willingly let her go, because he saw her as his most valuable investment. One evening, sitting alone with a broken heart, Dolly wrote a song. It was not a song of anger, but a song of farewell. The lyrics explained, "If I should stay, I would only be in your way. So I'll go. But I know I'll think of you every step of the way, and I will always love you." The next day, she went to Porter's office and said, "Porter, I've written a song for you." The air in the room was heavy with tension. She took her guitar and began to sing, "I Will Always Love You." Her voice trembled with emotion, and tears streamed down her face. When she finished, she looked up and saw that Porter Wagoner was also crying. He told her, "That's the best song you've ever written. You can go, as long as you let me produce that record." It was a moment of temporary release, but her fight for freedom was not over. In 1974, Dolly made an even bolder move by deciding to pay to get out of her contract. She had to borrow money from every source she could find and use all of her limited savings. This decision nearly made her bankrupt, but it gave her the most valuable thing she could possess: her freedom. She had finally broken the chains herself. The high price of explosive success. After she finally broke free from Porter Wagoner, Dolly Parton's solo career exploded in a way that no one could have predicted. In 1974, she released both Jolene and I Will Always Love You, and both songs went to #1 on the country charts. Soon after, Elvis Presley expressed his desire to record his own version of I Will Always Love You, but his manager demanded that Dolly sign over 50% of the song's publishing rights. Drawing on the hard business lessons she had learned from her battle with Porter, Dolly made the difficult but wise decision to refuse his offer, a choice that would eventually earn her millions of dollars. She continued to break down barriers, crossing over from country to pop music with her 1977 hit, Here You Come Again. In 1980, she starred in the Hollywood movie 9 to 5, alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. And the theme song, which she wrote and performed, became an anthem for working women everywhere and earned her an Academy Award nomination. Dolly proved she was not just a singer, she was a brilliant businesswoman. She fought to own her own master recordings, a rare achievement in the music industry. And in 1986, she fulfilled a lifelong dream by purchasing an amusement park in her home county and renaming it Dollywood. This was her way of giving back to the community that raised her, creating thousands of jobs for the people of the Appalachian Mountains. However, this incredible success did not bring her peace. Behind the famous smile and big hair, she was fighting a fierce internal battle. The fear of failure and the memory of her childhood poverty never left her, and she became obsessed with the idea that her success could vanish at any moment. This fear drove her to work constantly as she toured, recorded albums, acted in movies, and managed her growing businesses without ever taking a break. At night, she often woke up from terrible nightmares with her heart pounding in her chest, and a single question haunted her mind. Do I really deserve any of this? The immense pressure to be the perfect, happy version of Dolly Parton at all times was exhausting her both physically and mentally. She felt as if she were running on a treadmill with no stop button, believing that if she paused for even a second, she would fall and lose everything she had built. The bright spotlight that the world saw was slowly crushing her from the inside, personal tragedy and a moment at the edge. While she was building her empire, Dolly's personal life was a quiet and often lonely place. In 1966, she married Carl Dean, a private man who worked in construction and had no interest in the world of show business. Their love was quiet and enduring, but the price of Dolly's career was a constant state of loneliness. As she admitted, she was married more to her career than to her husband. Her life was a blur of tour buses, recording studios, and movie sets, while Carl remained at home by himself. This distance created deep cracks in their marriage, and their conflicts grew. One year on Carl's birthday, they had planned a romantic dinner, but Dolly was stuck at an important television taping and could not make it home on time. Carl waited for her, first at the restaurant and then at home, his disappointment turning into heartbreak. When she finally arrived late at night, a massive argument erupted, fueled by years of pent-up anger and resentment. Carl yelled words that cut her deeply, saying, "You don't respect me. You don't love me at all. So why did you marry me? You should just marry your career." In a moment of deep pain, he even cursed her, saying, "You will be alone for your entire life." At other times, their marriage was tormented by jealousy and suspicion. Carl accused her of having affairs with producers and co-stars, calling her disloyal and unfaithful. These wounds, inflicted by the person she loved most, caused Dolly unimaginable pain. By the mid-1980s, her world came crashing down. She underwent a partial hysterectomy, a surgery that permanently ended her lifelong dream of having children. The combined weight of her career pressures, her troubled marriage, and her physical health issues plunged her into a severe depression. She suffered from anxiety, gained a significant amount of weight, and felt completely empty inside, as if the light within her had gone out. In this darkest period of her life, thoughts of suicide began to consume her. One afternoon, while Carl was out, Dolly walked into her bedroom and opened a drawer where she kept a handgun for protection. She loaded the gun and sat alone on her bed, feeling the cold, heavy metal in her hand. She had reached her breaking point and decided to end her pain forever. As she was raising the gun, she heard a small sound at the door. Her little dog, Popeye, came running into the room, jumped onto the bed, and began wagging his tail and licking her face. He looked at her with his big, loving eyes, an expression of pure, unconditional love that seemed to say, "You are my entire world." That simple, loving gesture broke through her despair. She looked from the dog to the gun in her hand, and then she let the weapon fall to the floor. She hugged Popeye and began to sob uncontrollably, releasing all the pain, loss, and loneliness she had suppressed for years. After that terrifying moment, Dolly knew she needed help. She started seeing a therapist and began the long process of confronting her inner demons, learning to accept that it was okay to be broken. Throughout her recovery, Carl Dean remained by her side, a quiet and steady presence that served as an anchor, keeping her from drifting away. She had stood at the very edge of death and was brought back by the simple love of a small dog, giving her a second chance at life. A legacy of giving back. After surviving her years of personal crisis, loss, and her darkest moments, a new turning point came in Dolly's life. She had the opportunity to meet a well-known and respected priest, a compassionate spiritual leader whose wisdom profoundly affected her. Through their deep conversations and his teachings on mercy, forgiveness, and the meaning of giving, Dolly felt a powerful awakening. She came to understand that the best way to heal her own wounds was to help ease the suffering of others. This realization gave her a new and powerful purpose, leading her to dedicate the majority of her wealth and energy to philanthropy. Her greatest charitable effort was inspired by the memory of her father, who could not read. In 1995, she founded the Imagination Library, a program that mails a free, high-quality book every month to children from birth until the age of 5. What began in a single county in Tennessee has now expanded across the globe, and to date, the Imagination Library has gifted over 200 million books to children. Dolly's goal was to ensure that no child would grow up without access to books, the way her own beloved father did. Her generosity continued to grow. In 2016, when devastating wildfires destroyed homes in her native Sevier County, Dolly took immediate action. She established the My People Fund, which provided $1,000 a month for 6 months to every family that had lost their home. In 2020, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, she quietly donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, a contribution that directly supported the development of the Moderna vaccine. Dolly never had biological children, but her philosophy on life became clear. "I don't have children of my own," she once said, "but I have millions of children through my books and my kindness." She transformed her personal pain from poverty and lack of opportunity to deep personal loss into a lasting legacy of giving. This was more than charity. It was her way of rewriting her own story, turning her scars into a source of light for millions. Dolly Parton's journey began with a barefoot girl who was rejected by the world. It took her through hungry nights in Nashville, years of being treated like a possession, and incredible success that brought with it the crushing weight of pressure. That journey led her to the brink of death, alone in a room with a loaded gun. Hers is the story of a woman who fell down time and time again, and each time she chose to stand up, to keep going, and most importantly, to give back. Her life is not a fairy tale. It is a powerful story about the cruelty of the world, and a testament to the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Now, as we consider her life, we can look at our own. Are you in pain? Dolly has felt deeper pain. Do you feel like giving up? Dolly once held a gun to her own head. Do you feel like you are starting with nothing? Dolly started with less than nothing. Dolly Parton did not just survive. She transformed every one of her wounds into light. Today, her story leaves us with a profound and inspiring truth. No matter how harsh life can be, we always have the power to rewrite our own ending.